Welcome back, beautiful souls, to Unfiltered Soul Shifts. In today's episode, we are continuing what we spoke about last. Last episode, we touched base on shadow parts and shadow work, right? The parts of self that we need to know better. In this episode, we're continuing that and we are discussing a little bit more detail of parts work. Now, I mentioned that we don't necessarily have one personality. We've got an internal community. And I'll explain in a second what I mean by that. But it's because we were raised to believe we are one solid identity, a fixed identity. Whether it's something that's wrong with you, or something that you are thriving with. Examples like, I am anxious. Okay. Oh, you are so dramatic. Right. I am dramatic. I am strong. I'm bad at relationships. But what if these aren't identities? What if these are parts? What if that loud inner critic, the exhausted avoider, the high achieving perfectionist, that sensitive child are all members of your internal system? So, yes, today we're talking about parts work, specifically from the framework of internal family systems, right? Also known as IFS, and why understanding your internal community might be one of the most relieving things you ever do for yourself. Now, I'm not speaking about taking it to extremes, but again, this speaks more to internal work, right? Self healing. So, what is parts work? Parts work comes from the therapeutic model, as mentioned, internal family systems therapy, which was developed by Richard Schwartz. And really, the premise is simple, slightly revolutionary, whichever way you want to see it. But its bone says we are not a single unified personality and we are made up of parts. And these parts form this internal family system. Some common parts that you might recognize or you've heard about is your inner child, your inner critic, the protector, the achiever, the caretaker, the rebel, the wounded one, the numb one. The most important principle here is that no part is bad. Even the one you dislike the most, even the one that self sabotages you, or the angry one, or the jealous one, every single one has developed for a reason. Every part is trying in its own way to protect you. So some parts might be called managers. They try to keep your life controlled. Some parts might be like firefighters, right? They rush in when emotions feel overwhelming and try to save the day. Some might be the exile. So those are maybe younger, wounded parts that carry pain and you've tried to push them in its own little barrel and put the lid on it. But underneath all of them is what IFS calls the self, the grounded, calm, compassionate core of you. Not the loudest voice, not the wisest voice, but the core of you. Now, parts develop because we needed them at some point. As a child, you're dependent on attachment, and you learn fairly quickly what gets approval, what gets rejection, what keeps me safe, what causes rupture. And as a child, if you look at children, really, it is by trial and error. And sometimes they forget, but they forget to try to remember. And then at some point they remember, if I do this, mom and dad will do this. Oh, if I do this, I'm going to get into trouble, right? So they learn to adapt. Now, let's say a child grows up in a home where big emotions overwhelm the caregivers, right? Or conflict leads to withdrawal, or speaking up leads to punishment. Effectively, that child then starts to learn that if I stay quiet, I stay safe. Now, fast forward into adulthood. That adult then becomes conflict avoidant. They struggle to assert their needs. They start feeling anxious when tension starts rising because the learned emotion, what the nervous system is remembering, and that part of them, when they were a child, remembers if I'm quiet, I stay safe. But that's not weakness. It's the protector part doing its job based on data. Or maybe that child learned if I achieved, I got a lot of love, right? And as an adult, then that child becomes hyper competent. At the end of the coin, that child also becomes independent, capable. But underneath all of that, they're actually really terrified of failing. So parts start forming around survival, attachment, emotional safety, predictability, and belonging. But they don't just disappear because now all of a sudden you're 40 years old instead of 7 years old. They really just get more sophisticated and layered. And this is where most self help goes wrong, right? We try to eliminate parts. I need to stop being so insecure. Why am I like this? I hate the fact that I shut down when I should be speaking up. Gosh, I need to fix myself. But when you fight a part, it actually gets louder because, from its perspective, you're attacking the very thing that kept you alive, that kept you secure at that time. So, doing parts work, I would say, invites curiosity, but you do need to be curious about it because sometimes it takes some digging. Like, why do I react the way I do? And sometimes it's not on the surface level. It might be that part, that exiled part that you stuck in the barrel and put a lid on it, right? And then added a few bricks on top just to make sure it didn't come out. So parts work is not asking the question of what is wrong with me, but it's reframing the question to be, what is this part of me afraid of? Or what am I trying to protect? How old does this part of me feel? Is this a new thing? Is this something I've always done and I'm only realizing it now? When did I first learn this strategy? That it was okay to act like this? So let's use an example, right? Let's say there's part of you that procrastinates. So instead of saying, I am lazy, try, what is this part of me trying to avoid? Maybe that part of you is actually protecting you from failure. Maybe it's protecting you from judgment. Maybe it learned that visibility and being out there and active was dangerous. When you approach parts work with curiosity instead of criticism, the intensity softens because they really start to feel seen. And it's that acknowledgement of self that reduces the defensiveness. It adds a layer of safety. So, this is where it becomes practical, right? Language. And that's essentially what starts to change everything, how you frame it. It reduces shame. So, as I mentioned, instead of saying, I am lazy, you can also try, a part of me feels shut down. Instead of saying, I'm broken, say, or try, part of me is hurting. Instead of saying, I'm secure or I'm insecure, try, a part of me feels safe or unsafe right now. Notice what happens in your body when you say it that way. So just reframing it. It creates some space. It might trigger an emotion. You become more compassionate about yourself. There's separation from that strife, that feeling that often comes with that criticism. And you are no longer fused. You're observing it. And that observer, that grounded presence is yourself. That's you. So when we say I'm anxious, anxiety becomes an identity. However, when we say a part of me feels anxious, anxiety becomes an experience because you can still feel the anxiety, but you question, why am I feeling anxious? Which puts you in a position to deal with that anxiety better. And then your experiences can move. Shame locks parts in place. Curiosity invites movement. So tonight or during the day, if you have a moment and something activates you, pause. Instead of reacting immediately, try this internally. Something in me is activated. Now remember, you don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to stop the conversation and say, wait, something in me is activated. No, it's a matter of acknowledging it. Okay. Something in you is activated. Which part is here right now? What is it afraid would happen if it didn't react this way? Remember, you don't need to fix it on the spot. It's not something that needs to be fixed, it's something that needs to be noticed. Because sometimes healing begins not with change, but with witnessing. But just remember in closing, you are not one voice, you are a conversation. And the goal is not to silence these parts, it's to become the calm center that can listen to all of them. The critic, the child, the protector, the achiever, the one that wants to run away, the one that wants to stay. Wholeness isn't about eliminating your inner contradictions, it's about leading them with steadiness, with compassion, with awareness. You're not broken, you are layered. And every layer has a story. Until next time, beautiful souls, listen gently to the voices within.